Okay? All right. It's important to note that Ferguson paid attention to the totalities of the boys she worked with, as well as studied students who were considered to be volatile, incorrigible, violent, who she also noted and recognized, who she also recognized as respectful and diligent. How does that happen? Children that have been regarded as incorrigible, unsalvageable, bound for jail, their language, by the end of her study, or during her study, throughout her study, she regards them, quote unquote, she respects them, and she regards them as being respectful and dignified. How is that happening? How are we having two opposing views of the same person? The very people that's worked with them all that time refer to them as this language, and then this other person comes in and she totally describes them, she reconceptualizes them. Francis.
I feel like for some teachers, not all, but I feel like for some it may just be the ignorance of communication and understanding for that particular student. Naturally, I'm not stereotyping, but most white teachers may be able to communicate or level with majority students, whereas with a minority student they may feel they can't connect. So their way of doing things for majority students, which may work, may not work for the minority students. Therefore, since it's not, clear cut and dry and everything's not by default, they're not, wanting to do that custom setting. So they just look at it as, okay, they're unruly, they don't listen. So the lady at the end, she got, she had that communication understanding. She knew how to communicate with them. So therefore, they responded.
One more, Mr. Brown. How do we get these two opposing views? This happens to me all the time. I go inside the school, the teachers and everybody else is saying these are terrible kids, they need to be kicked out. And these are black people that tell me this, mind you. My white people too, but black people. I work with them for a year or two, totally different response. What's going on here?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with just like how you perceive the kids, and I think it has a lot to do with like kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy notion, because I feel like what you tell the kids is, kind of how they'll end up. However you treat them is however they'll respond. If you treat them like, like they need to be going to college, you encourage them and everything, and you tell them, you need to be doing this, this, and this, because you're going to college and you're going to do this, this, and this, then they raise their standards. But if you tell them, just do the basics or whatever, then, it's even worse. They fall away with it, because they figure, there's no point really. What's the point of me doing good in school if I'm never going to go to college or anything anyway? And, it doesn't make a difference. So they fall even worse than, than the average, I think.
What does Ferguson say about hip-hop? And what did the teacher say about hip-hop? Particularly that gangster rap music. So page 16. What is she saying about that gangster rap, hardcore cursing, misogynistic music? And how do their educators talk to them about their music? Let's say general. Let's read out loud. We don't have much time. Can I get a volunteer? Mr. Francis. Start with my introduction and just continue up to the next page where race signifies. Let's finish this up on page 17.
My introduction to this music opened up a cultural space to me that was far more rich and critically innovative than I expected. It was more than background noise and mindless escape of music of my own youth that reproduced simple, hegemonic notions of romance and power. Instead, I discovered a potent alternative site of knowledge for youth about bodies and beauty, sexuality, gender relationships, racial identification, authority, justice, and injustice, loyalty and friendship, style and address transmitted through a vehicle that simultaneously engaged pleasure and fantasy.
Hold on 1 second. Let's process for 2 seconds. What did she just say? What did she just say?
She pretty much went on the notion of, I guess kind of what you hear today, really. Everything from financial means to physical means, or guys wanting girls, or girls wanting guys, or wanting to have the nicest things. Just that whole fantasy. That fantasy world that you want to live in, everything's going to be perfect.
Okay.
You don't have to work when it comes easily.
Please continue.
My brief and intense exposure to and growing familiarity with this cultural production was an indispensable element in alerting me to some key sources that the boys drew on for self-fashion. tubies are especially significant for this work. First, as I listened to the music, heard the lyrics, watched the images, I became conscious of the highly controversial and metal figure of the gangster in gangster rap. Rather than the stigmatized figure of the criminal feared by members of society, the gangster rap music and videos was an important medium for articulating the tragic realities of urban life, as well as the dangerous pleasures and privileges of being male. This image led me to consider the multiple ways of incorporating authority figures, rules, and laws, transgressive acts and consequences into a worldview. Second, I became aware that the alternative critical discourse and heightened consciousness about race and racism that some kids brought to school were reflected in the lyrics and images of rap music.
Okay, one more time. What is she saying about gangster rap music? The hardcore, misogynistic, sexual, violent rap music that a lot of us have difficulty dealing with. What is she saying about that music? This is an older woman, probably in the 60s, if not her 70s, one of the most highly accomplished scholars that we have in the world. What is she saying, Ms. Malone?
She's saying that it brings the problems of the inner city to like the forefront and like to the mainstream and kind of articulates them. They bring images of the inner city to the forefront and make the kids see like the stuff that they're living, even though they're not necessarily gangsters, but they're still living and feel the racism and feel the poverty and the
Why are educators resistant to their voice? Why do you think Ferguson thinks educators are resistant? Why does she embrace the gangster rap lyrics that her children are bringing her in the study, and the very educators around them are devaluing it or making it into something else? Somebody else, friends. Somebody else. Mr. Hicks, what do you think, brother? Not sure? Huh? Okay, cool, great, gravy. How we doing? I'm Miss Elise. What do you think?
I think it's because like the educators probably hear it as angry and like violent. The way it's presented is just very strong and very passionate, so they don't really hear they hear it, like she said, as background noise. Whereas she kind of saw deeper into it and considered it for the content of it, and actually listened to it versus just like, oh, it's loud, it's noisy, turn it on.
Let me argue too. I think there's a cultural element as well, and we know this as well. Where's my chalk at? 85% of all teachers, particularly in low-income communities of color, some would say 90%, but I feel better with 85%. Are white women that teaching these children, and they're generally middle class, or not from the community. By far, 85% of people who teach low-income children of color are white women, and mostly liberal. I think that is another reason why they don't understand the rap music. One more comment, Ms. Thomas.
Oh, that's what I was going to say. The people that are teaching these kids don't even see that this problem does exist. So to them, the music is just a fantasy world, when in all actuality, it's something that really does happen. They just don't understand.
Totally agree. Totally agree. All right. Race, let's talk about it. According to Ferguson, school as an institution made no connection. The actual school as an institution made no connection between who they punished and the race of those students. This happens all the time in school. They almost act as if race has little to do with anything. They don't even notice that most of the black boys are the ones that are being disciplined in the school, because they're just, in their mind, only disciplining those students who deserve to be disciplined. Yeah? Excuse me, one second, bro. In fact, the institution moved as if race had little to do with anything. Ferguson argues that race is simply, quote unquote, a baseline category used to classify and distribute. Ferguson says that race in this space is a baseline category used to classify and distribute students. Punishment was simply a matter of individual choice. If you want to learn, you can. According to Ferguson, that was the attitude of the teachers. If you want to behave, you can. If you want to progress, you can. It's totally up to you. And I actually do agree with that at the end of the day. It is totally up to you. But it also has a lot to do with everything else as well.